In the early years of World War II, America was a nation walking a tightrope. The fighting in Europe was escalating, but the United States had not officially entered the war. Public opinion was deeply divided. Some Americans believed the country needed to prepare for conflict. Others argued that the ocean would protect them and that European problems should stay in Europe. While politicians debated, diplomats negotiated, and intelligence agencies scrambled to understand Germany's next moves, something far more dangerous was happening quietly in the background. One of the most sensitive communication channels in American government had been compromised by someone few people had ever heard of, a young code clerk named Tyler Kent. The strange thing about Kent's case is that he did not look like the sort of person who could shake the foundations of international diplomacy. He wasn't a senior official. He wasn't a high-ranking officer. He wasn't a political insider. He was simply a code clerk, a mid-level employee responsible for handling encrypted cables between Washington and American representatives overseas. To most people, he appeared polite, quiet, and surprisingly ordinary. But the position he held gave him access to some of the most sensitive information in the United States government. In 1939 and 1940, Kent was assigned to the American Embassy in London. His job involved deciphering and transmitting coded messages. These were not routine memos. They included diplomatic communications from the president, discussions about aid to Britain, early drafts of major agreements, and private correspondence between Roosevelt and Churchill that bypassed traditional channels. These cables contained insights into America's political direction long before they became public knowledge. The embassy was supposed to be secure. Only a small number of people were allowed to handle the encrypted messages. But Kent had something unusual. He had the ability to access cables without anyone else looking over his shoulder. He worked alone in the code room. He knew how to crack open the sealed pouches. He could read everything before sending or filing it. Most of the time, he followed protocol. But over time, he began to convince himself that what he was reading should not be kept hidden from the world. Kent believed strongly that America should never enter the war. He feared the United States was being pulled into a European conflict through secret agreements and hidden promises. In his mind, the public had a right to know what the president was discussing with foreign leaders. Kent did not see himself as someone working against his country. He saw himself as someone protecting it. But his actions, no matter what he believed, aligned perfectly with German intelligence objectives. He began secretly copying and collecting documents. These included letters between Roosevelt and Churchill, communications about naval cooperation, and early discussions about providing Britain with ships, aircraft, and equipment. Some documents revealed how far the United States was willing to go to support Britain. Before officially joining the conflict, Germany recognized immediately how valuable this information was. It confirmed that America was leaning toward aiding Britain long before the American public understood the full picture. Kent started sharing his opinions with a small circle of people in London who were openly against Britain's war effort. One of them had quiet connections to German diplomatic channels. Kent believed he was simply informing a group of like-minded individuals, but in reality, the information began flowing toward Germany through this network. He was never trained as a spy. He did not think in terms of handlers or networks, but the effect was the same. Sensitive American diplomatic messages slowly began landing in the hands of foreign intelligence officers. The risk increased dramatically when Kent began taking entire documents home. Instead of keeping them in the secure embassy code room, he hid them in his apartment in London. He told himself he was preserving them, that he needed them for evidence in case the world ever learned about the secret agreements forming between Washington and London. But storing classified material in a private residence was a direct threat to national security. If the documents fell into the wrong hands, they could expose American strategy instantly. By early 1940, British authorities were tracking unusual leaks of information that lined up suspiciously well with American diplomatic cables. They knew the breach had to be happening somewhere in London. They also knew that if the truth came out publicly, it could damage the fragile cooperation building between the United States and Britain. Britain needed American friendship desperately. Anything suggesting secret dealings could lead to political instability. Anything suggesting American staff were compromised could be disastrous, so they quietly approached the embassy. When British investigators and American officials compared notes, Tyler Kent's name rose to the top of the list almost immediately. His access was dangerously broad. His political views were extreme. His routines had become erratic, and he had begun interacting with people outside the embassy who were known for their anti-war stance. The British made a decision that would shape the rest of Kent's life. They invoked diplomatic procedures, entered his apartment, and searched it. What they found stunned them. Drawers, boxes, and file folders were stuffed with hundreds of classified documents, including copies of messages between Roosevelt and Churchill that were never supposed to leave the government's hands. For investigators, it was undeniable proof that Kent had compromised the most sensitive communication channel between America and Britain. He was arrested quietly. There were no dramatic scenes, no photographers, no public hearings. The entire case was considered too dangerous to expose. If the public learned that an American clerk had been leaking the private conversations between the two leaders, it could have caused political chaos. So Kent was imprisoned under British law with full cooperation from American officials. He was held in isolation while investigators reviewed every document he had taken. What the investigation revealed next was even more alarming. Some of the information Kent leaked had already been routed through foreign channels and passed to German intelligence evaluators. The material did not stop there. It continued upward through Germany's intelligence structure, and sections of it were forwarded to the highest level of the government. Portions of Kent's leaks were ultimately placed in reports sent directly to the German leadership, meaning that insights from Roosevelt's private messages ended up on the desks of Hitler's top decision-makers during a crucial moment in the war's early years. The British court later sentenced Kent for violations of the Official Secrets Act. The Americans did not request his return. The entire episode was buried to avoid embarrassment and prevent diplomatic fallout. Only those at the highest levels of government knew what had truly happened. Behind closed doors, the case sent shockwaves through Washington. Officials realized that a single code clerk, not even a senior one, had managed to gather sensitive White House-level information and pass it along through a foreign network until it reached Germany's inner leadership circle. He did not need to be in the Oval Office. All he needed was access to the cables flowing in and out of it. His actions showed how vulnerable the communication chain could be if even one person ignored protocol. The United States immediately tightened its procedures. Code rooms became more secure. Access to sensitive messages was restricted. Background checks became stricter. Communications were monitored more closely, and White House documents were handled with levels of caution that had never existed before. The Tyler Kent case forced the United States to rethink internal security at a moment when global events were accelerating toward full-scale conflict. What makes Kent's story so unusual is that he never viewed himself as someone harming his country. He believed he was protecting America from being pulled into a war he feared would destroy it. But intentions do not change consequences. The information he leaked helped Germany understand American political divisions and diplomatic strategy. It revealed how far Roosevelt was willing to go to support Britain before the U.S. officially entered the conflict. And it showed foreign intelligence agencies that America's most sensitive communications could be vulnerable. When America finally entered the war after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the Tyler Kent case faded into the background, overshadowed by the scale of events that followed. But intelligence agencies never forgot it. It became a quiet warning, a reminder that even small breaches can have enormous consequences when they involve high-level communication. Tyler Kent served his sentence and was eventually released, but he never regained a position of trust. His actions had changed diplomatic security procedures, reshaped intelligence protocols, and left a mark on the hidden history of the early war years. He remained a symbol of how one ordinary man with access to extraordinary information could unintentionally hand vital insights to the enemy. And that is the full story of Tyler Kent, the code clerk whose actions allowed pieces of Roosevelt's private messages to reach Hitler's leadership circle, making his case one of the most unusual and dangerous intelligence breaches of the entire war.